Yeah, we've had Ruby, who I guess is perhaps most notable in this context for having been married to Leo, but still strikes me as somebody who had a lot going for her anyway. We've got Nellie, who's an ace reporter, and now this lady who is an entrepreneur, a female entrepreneur in the latter half of the 19th century. So these are all pretty strong female characters, aren't they?
Well, I have to admit, I did have a little bit of help in that. I married a man by the name of James Whiteside that owned pretty much all of Lookout Mountain. And when he died in 1861, I inherited his estate, of course being his wife and all.
Excuse me, before you go any further, how is it possible to own a mountain? From whom do you buy the mountain in the first place? Or do you buy it? Or just say, this is mine, you know? Well,
some of it was claimed, and when they ran the Indians out of the area, a lot of it was purchased from the government. So that's how most people got hold of all the land that they got. A lot of it was just, they got it from the government because the Indians, you know, they ran the Indians off in the Trail of Tears and such.
So what did James do for money? How did he come up with all this money?
Well, that was a little before my time. He was already an adult and had been married once, had children, and I was just kind of lucky enough to be hired as the governess. And then
so you meet this guy and he's already pretty well heeled and got a big house and all
that's it. He had already made his money.
Where'd you come from? What's your background?
I came, I don't remember. I came from another state. I came and was hired as a governess for James and his wife's children. And then she took ill and died, and a few months later then James and I were married.
How old were you at that point?
About 18. My real name is Lenora Harriet Whiteside.
And so, Lenora, you were quite a bit younger than James, I take it.
Quite a bit, yes. I mean, he actually had already had 5 or 6 children that, and I believe that a couple of them may have been not too terribly far from my age. So there was a little dissension, we'll just say.
I can imagine, yeah. The relationship between you and the children must have been a bit touchy. But given that you were so much younger than James, James predeceased you by a number of years.
That's right. He died in 1861, just right after the Civil War started.
And you lived until the first half of the 20th century, I think.
That's correct. That's correct. And James and I actually had several children of our own, so I was strapped with the responsibility of trying to take care of these children during the Civil War. And we actually had a house downtown. And when the Union Army came in and took over the town, they actually shipped me out. So my children and I were shipped up north for the time span of the Civil War.
You mean the Union Army shipped you up north?
Yes, because we were considered Confederate loyals. So they actually put us on a boxcar and shipped us up north.
But you weren't a captive, a war captive?
No.
Just set aside?
Right.
So, and they sent you up to D.C.?
Well, no, it was just I had to travel around in different places. I didn't really settle in one, but I did return after the war, and luckily my house was still standing. And part of my ingenuity, it was they gave my children and I one room to live in. And
who did?
The Union soldiers.
So they were still in Chattanooga at that point?
They were still occupying my house. Oh, well, one of my children came down with the measles, and I talked the doctor into spreading it around that she had smallpox. So the Union officers vacated quickly, thus giving me my house back.
Very resourceful. So you gotten rid of these interlopers and gotten your house back, and you are the de facto owner of Lookout Mountain.
That's correct. I had to, actually, a lot of James's papers were lost, so I had to prove things and went through a series of court. But yeah, actually, you know, I owned pretty much the top of Lookout Mountain. Part of it is the place where Point Park is now.
What'd you do with it? All this land that you owned?
That's where my entrepreneurship came in. I owned the only road that came up the mountain, and I turned it into a toll road. So people would have to pay to get up to the mountain, either to go to Lulu Lake or visit, or, you know, walk through the springs, or whatever they wanted to do on the mountain.
So there weren't a lot of people living up there at that point?
No.
It's mostly,
not year round.
Mostly open land.
Right.
People lived there in the summertime?
Yeah, some people had had summer homes up there.
Trying to get away from those mosquitoes that Newell was talking about.
Right. That's it.
Wow. So you had a pretty good little business going.
That's right.
People, everybody that comes up has to pass through your barricade and pay the toll.
That's correct.
Right. At what point did you develop what was just, I guess, the brow of the mountain into a park? Was that part of your? Was that another entrepreneurial exercise on your part?
Yeah, actually, I think at one time I charged a dime to get in and walk around. Of course, at that time the monuments weren't there, you know, and it was basically buying a view of Moccasin Bend, you know, going up there and that sort of thing.
So people go up there for a picnic?
I had the stone walls built so I could control entry, and so then I got to where I was charging, you know, for entry, so that was part of my income.
What did you do with all this money?
Kept it.
Lived well?
Kept suing for more.
Lived well?
Yes, sir.
Nobody ever challenged you, a female in this period?
Challenged me all the time. I was constantly in the courts with lawsuits and people claiming I didn't have the rights to this, that, and the other. And actually, I even married my attorney at one time to save on attorney fees. But he turned out to be a scoundrel, so I divorced him.
Smart move. I don't know where to go with this woman. She's amazing. So, how were you perceived by the people of Chattanooga? Did people regard you as somebody that they invited to the house? Were you socially acceptable kind of person, or were you sort of an outcast?
I was pretty much kept to myself, and was pretty much perceived as a witch, to speak kindly, because I caused so much trouble, probably more by men and interfering in their world and making my own way and that sort of thing.
So, I mean, there's a theme here, isn't there? Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me stop there. But it would seem that I mean, did you choose these women because of their background, or was it just happenstance? I mean, the impression I'm getting is that the idea that women were independent and self-actualizing was more common than most of us would have ever assumed.